A Christian group in Nigeria says around 50 of the more than 300 children kidnapped from a Catholic school this past week have escaped. They say the children have now been reunited with their families. Nigeria has seen a spate of attacks by armed gangs recently, with 2 schools and a church the latest targets. Security fears have sparked a wave of school closures across the country.
At least these children are leaving by choice. Parents across Nigeria have rushed to primary and secondary schools in the wake of a series of armed abductions.
We are sort of informed by the school yesterday that we should go and pick the children this morning for security reasons, which I understand actually, because as a parent you can imagine our distress.
The schools have been ordered to close because many lack sufficient security and are seen as soft targets for gangs of men who storm the premises and kidnap those inside. It's been a week of brazen attacks. Last Monday marked the first mass school kidnapping in more than 18 months. 25 students were taken from a girls' school in northwestern Kebbi State. They are all still missing. The following day, gunmen stormed a Christian church in the state of Kwara, killing 2 people and taking 38 others hostage. They have since been rescued by security forces. Then, just 3 days later, one of the worst mass abductions the country has ever seen. 315 students and teachers disappeared from a Catholic boarding school in Niger State when armed men stormed the campus in the early hours of the morning. Over the weekend, slight relief. 50 of those children managed to escape their captors, but the majority are still missing.
Not heard of anything. We don't know which group or terrorist group that's responsible for this. And I know that the security agencies, the government, and other major stakeholders, including the diocese, they're on top of the game. And we're just praying and hoping that these children will be rescued and returned back safely to their parents.
No one has claimed responsibility for any of the 3 abductions. But for years, heavily armed criminal gangs have carried out kidnappings for ransom. Nigerian President Bola Tinubu held an extended security conference on Sunday, where local media say it was decided around 100,000 police officers would be withdrawn from protecting so-called VIPs. They're being redirected to core policing duties, particularly in remote communities, like the ones still missing their children.
Well, for more on this, let's bring in Aisha Yesufu. She's a human rights activist with a focus on ending child abductions in Nigeria for over a decade now. She's one of the founders of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. Aisha, 50 children from last week's abduction series managed to miraculously escape their captors. Do you know how they are?
I personally don't know how they are. There haven't been reports on that. But it's eerily similar to what happened during the Chibok girls' abduction, when 276 were abducted and 57 managed to escape. But it's thankful. We're thankful that they have been able to get back home. But we must also understand that the children will be under extreme psychological, effect of this whole abduction. It's something that they should be taking care of, especially their mental state.
Is anything more known about the fate of the rest of the 300 recently kidnapped children?
Well, the fate of the other that are there, it's not as known as it should be, but hopefully the government, with the fact that there is so much international attention on the whole abduction, really do take it up and get the children back home. But we've heard of the attack that happened in the church, that 38 of them have been rescued, and that's a very welcoming development. And we do hope also that the whole children that have been abducted, both in Niger State and also in Kebbi State, get to be rescued and brought back home. Nigeria failed them by not protecting them in the first place, and we should not fail them again by not rescuing them immediately.
Now, you just mentioned that Nigeria failed them. The President Bola Tinubu has vowed to end the problem of kidnappings. Do you trust him to do that?
Absolutely not. I do not see that trust, but I do hope that the Nigerian government on its own will go beyond propaganda, because what we see, and I would just also like to add to the fact that, one of the things that really helped the CAC church in Kwara State, for them to get their issue well publicized and immediate action being taken on it could most likely be to the live streaming that they were doing. And so, of course, there was no denial that could come from that. We've seen repeatedly where the government is more interested in propaganda rather than actually securing lives and property. They will focus more on whatever it is that makes them look good rather than ensuring that, the lives and properties of the citizens are protected. Let's not forget that the primary responsibility of any government is the protection of lives and property. Unfortunately, with what we have with Tinubu, as far as I'm concerned, illegitimate government is the fact that they are more interested in how they look to the world rather than how secure the citizens are.
Now, can you explain why there is suddenly such a spike of this kind of cases?
I do not have the answers why there is suddenly a spark now, or maybe why not before, or maybe later on. I don't have that. But one of the things that I do know is that there's this target when schools are being targeted, religious houses are being targeted. It's usually because they are soft targets, and these are places where it is easy to pick a large number of people rather than when you go maybe to towns or individually to houses. And so because of that also, they do that. And it sort of like draws more attention to them. By drawing more attention to them, it forces the hand of the government to negotiate with them for them to be able to get as much whatever ransom it is that they want without any questions being asked. Like right now, we're hearing of the rescue, but there hasn't been accountability and transparency in what has transpired for that rescue to happen. We've said there are different ways that, of course, that rescue could happen. It could be a ransom, it could be negotiation, it could be through military operations. But somehow there's a need for that transparency for people to understand. But one of the things we have seen, being reported is the fact that the terrorist groups, they use this as a way of getting monies, and which they then use to fund their terrorist acts. And at the end of the day, Nigerian people keep on being the ultimate losers.
Now let's bring in our Lagos Bureau Chief, Amaka Okoye. Amaka, 50 of you abducted managed to escape. How did they do that?
That's a very important question that you've asked. Depends on who you're speaking to. If you speak to the federal government, it said that these 50, in fact, it said 51 of them were recovered. But if you speak to, for instance, the residents, the people in Papiri where this happened, they will say 50 of the girls escaped. And how did that happen? Of course, this attack, the attackers came with vans and motorcycles. That's how they took them away. And what we've heard so far, I've been speaking to residents, those who have been affected directly, those who, some of their words are back, and they said the fact is that these abductors apparently are not in the camp 24/7. So at some point they leave the camp, and these 50 whom we now know, escaped. It was at that point where they were either not in the camp or they're not looking at them that they began to run and to look for their way back into their communities. Of course, there is already government effort, security agencies are already deployed, but as far as we do know, these girls, these students escaped on their own. Remember, we are talking about young children. Some of them, obviously, are stronger than others, and so those who were able to run, of course, made it out of where they have been kept. So that's how we know that they escaped on their own.
Now, who's behind these kidnappings, and what do these kidnappers try to achieve?
I mean, I think the point now, as we do know, is basically, as again, experts and security analysts are pointing to, that these attacks, especially these recent ones, are more of economically motivated. They are for economic reasons, because we cannot say they are just only religiously motivated. Because in the same state, a government science secondary school has been attacked, where students were also taken. An Islamic school also attacked 3 months later, and then this. So basically, this, what we are seeing, is really kidnapping for ransom, and that's why more people are asking, especially those, for instance, in the Kebbi, in the Kwara one rather, that returned. How did they return? What happened? Was ransom paid? So basically, these criminal elements and these armed bandits or terrorists, if you like, in fact, are now kidnapping, especially for ransom, because in some cases they've mentioned what they want, the amount of money that they want, but in other cases they haven't. The suspicion generally is that this is economically motivated.
DW Lagos Bureau Chief Amaka Okoye there. Thank you very much, Amaka.